In the winter of February 1963, a man with a long criminal record walked into a small restaurant in Sacramento, California, with lethal intent. His name was Aaron C. Mitchell, a 32-year-old drifter born in Alabama, whose life had been marked by decades of brush. On May 23, 1963, after just days of testimony and deliberation, a Sacramento County jury convicted Aaron Mitchell of first-degree murder, alongside related charges of robbery and assault. The jury returned a death sentence on May 31, 1963. Mitchell's defense did not relent. At the first appeal to the Supreme Court of California, justices affirmed the murder conviction, but reversed the initial death sentence on procedural grounds, determining that the trial judge's instructions to the jury were flawed. Those instructions, including an incorrect explanation of how pardon and parole might be considered, required a new penalty trial. A second sentencing jury reconvened later that same year, and once again concluded that Mitchell should die for the killing of Officer Gamble. The Supreme Court of California unanimously affirmed the second death sentence on January 4, 1966. While appeals stretched upward to the United States Supreme Court, Mitchell's fate became intertwined with broader debates about capital punishment in the United States. Governors, including future President Ronald Reagan, who then held California's highest executive office, would be petitioned for clemency. Reagan reviewed the legal records, considered the arguments, and in 1966 denied Mitchell's plea for executive mercy, setting the stage for one of the most controversial executions in California's history. In the weeks leading up to his scheduled execution on April 12, 1967, Mitchell's conduct on death row grew increasingly erratic. Prison records and multiple witness accounts describe him attempting to harm himself, slashing his forearm with improvised metal fragments. Inmates later recalled that he stood naked in his cell, chanting and making religious pronouncements, claiming divine identity as anxiety gripped him. The final weeks of Aaron Mitchell's life unfolded inside San Quentin State Prison, where California housed its condemned inmates and carried out executions. By early April 1967, Mitchell had exhausted every judicial remedy available under state and federal law. His attorneys filed last-minute petitions alleging mental incompetence, arguing that his increasingly erratic behavior rendered him legally insane and therefore ineligible for execution. Prison psychiatrists were ordered to observe him closely. Their written reports, later entered into official records, acknowledged Mitchell's agitation and self-harm, but concluded that he understood the nature of his punishment and the reason the state intended to carry it out. Under prevailing legal standards of the time, that finding was decisive, and no court intervened to stop the execution. On April 11, 1967, less than 24 hours before the scheduled execution, Mitchell was transferred from death row to a holding cell closer to San Quentin's gas chamber. Guards documented that he was placed under constant observation, According to prison logs and later journalistic accounts drawn from staff interviews, Mitchell oscillated between long periods of silence and sudden outbursts. He reportedly tore at his bedding, refused meals, and repeated religious phrases. Despite his behavior, officials recorded that he responded coherently when addressed directly, answered questions about the date in his sentence, and recognized that he was facing execution for the murder of Officer Arnold Gamble. That night, Mitchell's attorneys made one final attempt to secure a stay by contacting Governor Ronald Reagan's office. Reagan's legal advisors reviewed the new filings and the psychiatric assessments already completed. In the early hours of April 12th, Reagan formally denied clemency, reaffirming his earlier position that the courts had provided Mitchell with due process and that the sentence should be carried out. With that decision, all legal avenues were closed. Just after midnight on April 12, 1967, San Quentin officials began the execution protocol. Witness lists had been finalized in advance, including prison administrators, law enforcement representatives, medical personnel, and members of the press. California law required that the execution take place in the gas chamber, the state's mandated method at the time. The chamber itself, a stark steel structure, had been used dozens of times before, but each execution followed the same rigid sequence designed to minimize deviation and document every step. Shortly before 1 a.m., guards escorted Aaron Mitchell from his cell. Accounts from prison staff describe him as physically weak, but able to walk unassisted. He did not resist. He was dressed in prison clothing and shackled according to protocol. When asked if he had any final statement, Mitchell reportedly made brief, disjointed remarks invoking God. Official records do not indicate a lengthy final speech, only that he acknowledged the presence of witnesses and spoke in religious terms rather than addressing the crime itself. At approximately 1:15 a.m., Mitchell was seated inside the gas chamber and secured to the chair. A stethoscope was attached to his chest, so a physician could monitor his heartbeat. After final checks, the witnesses were seated behind glass, and the chamber door was sealed. At 1:16 a.m., the executioner released pellets of sodium cyanide into a container of sulfuric acid beneath the chair, initiating the chemical reaction that produced hydrogen cyanide gas. Witnesses later described the effects as rapid, but visibly distressing. Mitchell inhaled sharply, then began to gasp. His body reportedly tensed against the restraints. According to contemporaneous newspaper accounts and official logs, he struggled for several minutes, breathing unevenly as the gas took effect. Medical personnel monitored his vital signs throughout the process. After approximately 10 minutes, the attending physician declared that Mitchell's heart had stopped. At 1:26 a.m., Aaron Mitchell was pronounced dead. He was 32 years old, making him one of the youngest individuals executed in California during the modern era of capital punishment. His execution marked the last use of the gas chamber in California for nearly 5 years, as legal challenges and shifting public opinion soon brought executions in the state to a halt. The immediate aftermath of Mitchell's execution was marked by controversy. Civil rights groups and death penalty opponents pointed to his erratic behavior in the days leading up to the execution as evidence that the state had executed a mentally unstable man. Supporters of the sentence, including many law enforcement organizations, emphasized the fact that Mitchell had killed a police officer in the line of duty and had been afforded multiple trials, appeals, and reviews. Officer Arnold Gamble's death remained central in official statements, with authorities stressing that the execution was intended to uphold the law and affirm accountability for the killing of a public servant. In the years that followed, Aaron Mitchell's case continued to be cited in legal scholarship and capital punishment debates. Court opinions reviewing California's death penalty system referenced his appeals as examples of procedural safeguards, while critics highlighted the execution as emblematic of the moral and psychological concerns surrounding capital punishment. When California executions resumed briefly in the early 1970s, the gas chamber remained controversial, and the state ultimately abandoned it decades later. Mitchell's life story, as reconstructed from court records and prison files, revealed a pattern of instability, crime, and institutionalization from an early age. Born in Alabama and raised in difficult circumstances, he accumulated a criminal record as a teenager, moving through reform schools, jails, and prisons long before the robbery that led to Officer Gamble's death. None of those earlier interventions altered his trajectory. By the time he stood before a jury in Sacramento in 1963, prosecutors portrayed him as a habitual offender whose final crime was the inevitable culmination of years of lawlessness. Defense attorneys countered with evidence of his troubled upbringing and mental health struggles, but those arguments ultimately failed to spare him. The execution of Aaron Mitchell closed a single case, but left open enduring questions about justice, punishment, and mental competency that would continue to shape American law. His name remains in appellate decisions, historical accounts of San Quentin, and the broader narrative of California's death penalty. Not as an abstract symbol, but as a documented example of how the system operated at a particular moment in time, from crime to conviction, from death row to the gas chamber.